Rojava, also known as Western Kurdistan or Syrian Kurdistan, is a de facto autonomous region originating in 3 self-governing cantons in northern Syria. Rojava is formed of most of Al-Hasakah Governorate, northern parts of Al-Raqqah Governorate and northern parts of Aleppo Governorate. The region gained its autonomy in November 2013 as part of the ongoing Rojava conflict, establishing a society based on principles of direct democracy, gender equality, and sustainability. Rojava consists of the 3 official cantons of Jazira, Kobani, and Afrin, and the unofficial Shahba region. It is unrecognized as autonomous by the government of Syria and is a participant in the Syrian civil war. On the 16th of March 2016, the de facto administration of Rojava declared the establishment of a federal system of government as the Federation of Northern Syria.Rojava. In the Kurdish national narrative, Rojava is one of the 4 parts of a Greater Kurdistan, which also includes parts of southeastern Turkey, northern Iraq, and northwestern Iran. However, Rojavan government and society is polyethnic. Geography: Rojava lies to the west of the Tigris along the Turkish border. There are 3 cantons: Jazira, Kobani, Afrin Canton, and the Shahba region. Jazira Canton borders Iraqi Kurdistan to the southeast. Other borders are disputed in the Syrian civil war. All cantons are at latitude approximately 36.5 degrees north. They are relatively flat except for the Kurd mountains in Afrin Canton. Historical background: Rojava takes up a region known as the Fertile Crescent, and includes archaeological sites dating to the Neolithic. In antiquity, the area was part of the Mitanni kingdom, its center being the Khabur River Valley in modern-day Jazira Canton. It was then part of Assyria for a long time. The last surviving Assyrian imperial records, from between 604 BC and 599 BC, were found in and around the Assyrian city of Dorkatlimu in what is now Jazira Canton. Later it was ruled by the Achaemenids, Hellenes, Artaxiads, Romans, Parthians, Sasanians, Byzantines, and successive Arab Islamic caliphates. The Kurd mountains were already Kurdish inhabited when the Crusades broke out at the end of the 11th century. According to René Dussault, the region of Kurdar and the plain near Antioch were settled by Kurds since antiquity. During the Ottoman Empire, large Kurdish-speaking tribal groups both settled in and were deported to areas of northern Syria from Anatolia. The largest of these tribal groups was the Rashwin Confederation, which was initially based in Adıyaman province but eventually also settled throughout Anatolia. The Milli Confederation, mentioned in 1518 onward, was the most powerful group and dominated the entire northern Syrian steppe in the second half of the 18th century. Their influence continued to rise and eventually the Lead-Timur was appointed Ottoman governor of Al-Raqqah Governorate. The Kurdish dynasty of Jan Bulads ruled the region of Aleppo as Ottoman governors in 1591 to 1607. At the beginning of the 17th century, districts of Jarablus and Seruj on the left bank of the Euphrates had been settled by Kurds. Danish writer C. Niebuhr, who traveled to Jazira in 1764, recorded 5 nomadic Kurdish tribes and 6 Arab tribes. According to Niebuhr, the Kurdish tribes were settled near Mardan in Turkey, and paid the governor of that city for the right to graze the herds in the Syrian Jazira. The Kurdish tribes gradually settled in villages and cities and are still present in Jazira. The Ottoman province of Diyarbakir, which included parts of modern-day northern Syria, was called Ayalai Kurdistan during the Tanzimat reforms period. Until the 19th century, Kurdistan did not include the lands of Syrian Jazira in some books. The Treaty of Sèvres putative Kurdistan did not include any part of today's Syria. According to McDowell, Kurds slightly outnumbered Arabs in Jazira in 1918. The demographics of northern Syria saw a huge shift in the early part of the 20th century when the Ottoman Empire conducted ethnic cleansing of its Armenian and Assyrian Christian populations, and some Kurdish tribes joined in the atrocities committed against them. Many Assyrians fled to Syria during the genocide and settled mainly in the Jazira area. French mandate things soon changed, however, with the immigration of Kurds beginning in 1926 following the failure of the Sheikh Said rebellion against the Turkish authorities. While many of the Kurds in Syria have been there for centuries, waves of Kurds fled their homes in Turkey and settled in Syria, where they were granted citizenship by the French mandate authorities. This large influx of Kurds moved to Syria's Jazira province. It is estimated that 25,000 Kurds fled at this time to Syria. In the late 1930s, a small but vigorous separatist movement emerged in Karmashli, with some support from French mandate officials. The movement actively lobbied for autonomy direct under French rule and separation from Syria on the ground that majority of the inhabitants were not Arabs. Syrian nationalists saw the movement as a profound threat to their eventual rule. The Syrian nationalists allied with local Arab Shamal tribal leader and Kurdish tribes. They together attacked the Christian movement in many towns and villages. Local Kurdish tribes who were allies of Shahba tribal sacked and burned the Assyrian town of Amuda. In 1941, the Assyrian community of al-Malakiyah was subjected to a vicious assault. Even though the assault failed, Assyrians felt threatened and left in large numbers, and the immigration of Kurds from Turkey to the area converted al-Malakiyah, al-Darbasiyah and Amuda to Kurdish-majority cities. According to the French report to the League of Nations in 1937, the population of Jazira consisted of 82,000 Kurdish villages, 42,000 Muslim Arab pastoralists, and 32,000 Christian town dwellers. Between 1932 and 1939, a Kurdish Christian autonomy movement emerged in Jazira. The demands of the movement were autonomous status similar to the Sanjak of Alexandretta, the protection of French troops, promotion of Kurdish language in schools and hiring of Kurdish officials. The movement was led by Michel Dome, mayor of Karmashli, Hannah Hebe, general vicar for the Syriac Catholic Patriarch of Jazira, and the Kurdish notable Hafez Aga. Some Arab tribes supported the autonomists while others sided with the central government. In the legislative elections of 1936, autonomous candidates won all the parliamentary seats in Jazira and Jarablus, while the nationalist Arab movement known as the National Bloc won the elections in the rest of Syria. After victory, the National Bloc pursued an aggressive policy toward the autonomists. The Jazira governor appointed by Damascus intended to disarm the population and encourage the settlement of Arab farmers from Aleppo, Homs and Hama in Jazira. In July 1937, armed conflict broke out between the Syrian police and the supporters of the movement. As a result, the governor and a significant portion of the police force fled the region and the rebels established local autonomous administration in Jazira. In August 1937, a number of Christians in Amuda were killed by a pro-Damascus Kurdish chief. In September 1938, Hafez Aga chaired a general conference in Jazira and appealed to France for self-government. The new French High Commissioner, Gabriel Pure, dissolved parliament and created autonomous administrations for Jabal Druz, Latakia and Jazira in 1939, which lasted until 1943. Rule from Damascus. The polyethnic Rojava region under Syrian rule suffered from persistent policies of Arab nationalism and attempts of forced Arabization, which were directed against its ethnic Kurdish population. The region received few investment or development from the central government. Laws discriminated against Kurds from owning property, and many were without citizenship. Property was routinely confiscated by government loan sharks. Kurdish language education was forbidden and had no place in school, compromising Kurdish students' education. Hospitals lacked equipment for advanced treatment and instead patients had to be transferred outside Rojava. Numerous names of places which had been known in Kurdish were Arabized in the 1960s and 1970s. In his report for the 12th session of the UN Human Rights Council titled Persecution and Discrimination Against Kurdish Citizens in Syria, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights held that successive Syrian governments continued to adopt a policy of ethnic discrimination and national persecution against Kurds, completely depriving them of the national, democratic and human rights, an integral part of human existence. The government imposed ethnically based programs, regulations and exclusionary measures on various aspects of Kurds' lives, political, economic, social and cultural. There have been various instances of the Syrian government arbitrarily depriving ethnic Kurdish citizens of the citizenship. The largest of these instances was a consequence of a census in 1962, which was conducted for exactly this purpose. 120,000 ethnic Kurdish citizens, or the citizenship arbitrarily taken away and becoming stateless, while other ethnic minorities in Syria like Armenians, Circassians and Assyrians were permitted to open private schools for the education of their children. Kurds were not. The status was passed to the children of a stateless Kurdish father. In 2010, Human Rights Watch estimated the number of such stateless ethnic Kurdish citizens of Syria at 300,000. In 1973, the Syrian authorities confiscated 750 square kilometers of fertile agricultural land in Al-Hasakah Governorate, which were owned and cultivated by tens of thousands of Kurdish citizens, and gave it to Arab families brought in from other provinces. In 2007, in another such scheme in Al-Hasakah Governorate, 6,000 square kilometers around al-Malakiyah were granted to Arab families, while tens of thousands of Kurdish inhabitants of the villages concerned were evicted. These and other expropriations of ethnic Kurdish citizens followed a deliberate master plan, called Arab Belt Initiative, attempting to depopulate the resource-rich Jazira of its ethnic Kurdish inhabitants and settle ethnic Arabs there. Autonomy. During the Syrian civil war, Syrian government forces withdrew from 3 Kurdish enclaves, leaving control to local militias in 2012. Because of the war, People's Protection Units were created by the Kurdish Supreme Committee to defend the Kurdish inhabited areas in Syria. In July 2012, the YPG established control in the towns of Kobani, Amuda and Afrin. The 2 main Kurdish groups, the Kurdish National Council and the Democratic Union Party, afterwards formed a joint leadership council to administer the towns. Later that month, the cities of al-Malakiyah, Ras al-Ain, al-Darbasiyah, and al-Mu'abada also came under the control of the People's Protection Units. The only major Kurdish majority cities that remained under government control were al-Hasakah and al-Qamishli, although parts of both soon also came under the control of the YPG. In July 2013, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant began to forcibly displace Kurdish civilians from towns in Al-Raqqah Governorate. Governorate. After demanding that all Kurds leave Tel Abyad or else be killed, thousands of civilians, including Turkmens and Arabs, fled on the 21st of July. Its fighters looted and destroyed the property of Kurds, and in some cases, resettled displaced Sunni Arab families from the Innebek district, Deir ez-Zor and Al-Raqqah, in abandoned Kurdish homes. A similar pattern was documented in Tel Arab and al-Hasakah in July 2013. As ISIL consolidated its authority in Al-Raqqah, Kurdish civilians were forcibly displaced from Tel Akkad and Kobani in March and September 2014, respectively. In 2014, Kobani was besieged by ISIL and later liberated by YPG forces and the Free Syrian Army cooperating as Euphrates Volcano, with air support from United States-led airstrikes. In January 2015, the YPG fought against Syrian regime forces in al-Hasakah, and clashed with those stationed in Qamishli in June 2015. After the latter clashes, Nazir Haj Mansour, a Kurdish official in the northeast, stated, "The regime will with time get weaker. I do not imagine the regime will be able to strengthen its position." On the 13th of October 2015, Amnesty International accused YPG of demolishing homes of village residents and forcing them out of areas under Kurdish control. According to Amnesty International, some displaced people said that the YPG has targeted the villages on the pretext of supporting ISIL. Some villages revealed the existence of a small minority that might have sympathized with the group. The YPG also threatened the villages with U.S. coalition airstrikes if they failed to leave. The village of Hassaniya was almost completely razed to the ground, leaving only 14 out of 225 houses standing. On the 10th of February, Rojava's first representation office outside of Kurdistan opened in Moscow in order to develop a comprehensive partnership with Moscow. Quote, "This will grow support for autonomy, Kurdish international diplomatic relations and possibly independence in the near future." On the 18th of February 2016, the YPG had seized the Mena military airbase and the Sunni Arab town of Tal Rifat and announced that they had been given Kurdish names. On the 17th of March 2016, at a conference in Milan, Syrian, Turkmen, Arab, Christian and Kurdish officials declared the establishment of Federation of Northern Syria.Rojava in the areas they controlled in northern Syria, which would encompass ethnic minority groups. The conference was led in large part by the Kurdish PYD party, though officials reaffirmed they would not support the partition of Syria. The declaration was quickly renounced by both the Syrian government and oppositional National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces. Politics. The political system of Rojava is based on its constitution, which is called the Charter of the Social Contract. The constitution was ratified on January 9, 2014. It provides that all Rojava residents shall enjoy a fundamental right of gender equality and freedom of religion. It also provides for property rights. Abdullah Öcalan, a Kurdistan Workers' Party leader imprisoned in Imrali, Turkey, is an iconic and popular figure in Rojava whose ideas shaped the region's society and politics. In prison, Öcalan corresponded with Murray Bookchin, who favored social ecology, direct democracy, and libertarian municipalism. In March 2005, Öcalan issued his Declaration of Democratic Confederalism in Kurdistan, based on Bookchin's ideas, calling upon citizens to stop attacking the government and instead create municipal assemblies, which he called democracy without the state. Öcalan envisioned these assemblies as forming a pan-Kurdistan confederation, united for purposes of self-defense and with shared values of environmentalism, gender equality, and ethnic, cultural, and religious pluralism. The ideas of Bookchin and Öcalan became established in Rojava, where hundreds of neighborhood-based communes have established across the 3 Rojava cantons. Rojava has a co-governance policy in which each position at each level of government in Rojava includes a female equivalent of equal authority to a male. Similarly, the top 3 officers of each municipality must include 1 Arab, 1 Kurd and 1 Christian, providing for ethnic balance that some have compared to the Lebanese confessionalist system. Rojava politics has been described as having libertarian transnational aspirations influenced by the PKK's shift toward anarchism, but also includes various tribal, ethno-sectarian, capitalist and patriarchal structures. Rojava divides itself into regional administrations into 3 cantons: Jazira, Kobani, and Afrin. The governance model of Rojava has an emphasis on local management, with democratically elected committees to make decisions. The polyethnic movement for a democratic society, led by the Democratic Union Party, is the political coalition governing Rojava. It succeeds a brief intermediate period from 2012, when a Kurdish Supreme Committee had been established by the PYD and the Kurdish National Council, the latter itself a coalition of nationalist Kurdish parties, as the governing body. According to Shahba of the Haringey Solidarity Group, the PYD-led TEV-DEM has been the most successful organ in Rojava because it has the determination and power to change things. It includes many people who believe in working voluntarily at all levels of service to make the event experiment successful. In March 2016, Hediye Yusuf and Mansa Selim were elected co-chairpersons for the Executive Committee to organize a constitution for the region, to replace the 2014 constitution. Yusuf said the decision to set up a federal government was in large part driven by the expansion of territories captured from Islamic State. Now, after the liberation of many areas, it requires us to go to a wider and more comprehensive system that can embrace all the developments in the area, that will also give rights to all the groups to represent themselves and to form their own administrations. Quote, in July 2016, a draft for the new constitution was presented, taking up the general progressive and democratic confederalist principles of the 2014 constitution, mentioning all ethnic groups living in Rojava, addressing the cultural, political and linguistic rights. The only political camp within Rojava fundamentally opposed were Kurdish nationalists, in particular of the KNC, who want to pursue a path towards the pan-Kurdish nation-state rather than establishing a polyethnic federation as part of Syria. Community government. Local elections were held in March 2015. The system has been described as pursuing a bottom-up, Athenian-style direct form of democratic governance, contrasting the local communities taking on responsibility versus the strong central governments favored by many states. In this model, states become less relevant and people govern through councils. Its program immediately aimed to be very inclusive, and people from a range of different backgrounds became involved, including Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, Syrian Turkmen and Yazidis. It sought to establish a variety of groups, committees and communes on the streets in neighborhoods, villages, counties and small and big towns everywhere. The purpose of these groups was to meet every week to talk about the problems people face where they live. The representatives of the different community groups meet in the main group in the villages or towns called the House of the People. As a September 2015 report in the New York Times observed, for a former diplomat like me, I found it confusing. I kept looking for a hierarchy, the singular leader, or signs of a government line, when In fact, there was none. There were just groups. There was none of that stifling obedience to the party, or the obsequious deference to the big man, a form of government all too evident just across the borders, in Turkey to the north, and the Kurdish regional government of Iraq to the south. The confident assertiveness of young people was striking. Canton Government Art. 8 of the 2014 Constitution stipulates that all cantons in the autonomous regions are founded upon the principle of local self-government. Cantons may freely elect the representatives and representative bodies, and may pursue the rights insofar as it does not contravene the articles of the Charter. In January 2014, the Legislative Assembly of Afrin Canton elected Hevi Ibrahim Mustafa Prime Minister, who appointed Remzi Sexmas and Ebdil Hamid Mustafa her deputies, and the Legislative Assembly of Kobani Canton elected Enver Muslim Prime Minister, who appointed Berivan Hassan and Zalad Bergel his deputies. In Jazira Canton, the Legislative Assembly has elected ethnic Kurdish Akram Hasso as Prime Minister and ethnic Arab Hussein Taza al-Azam and ethnic Assyrian Elizabeth Gori as Deputy Prime Ministers. Federation government. On the level of the Rojava Federation, there are ministries dealing with the economy, agriculture, natural resources, and foreign affairs. The ministers are appointed by TEV-DEM. General elections were planned to be held before the end of 2014, but this was postponed due to fighting. Among other stipulations outlined is a quota of 40% for women's participation in government, as well as another quota for youth. In connection with a decision to introduce affirmative action for ethnic minorities, all governmental organizations and offices are based on a co-presidential system.